Hi everyone, today we're going to walk through 5 steps to create a structured hiring program specifically designed for startups. Now, there's a 5-step process here. The 5th step is going to be really important. A lot of people forget to do that. So make sure you watch to the end and you definitely implement that 5th step. So structured hiring is really important especially for startups, because typically as a scrappy early stage company, you may be creating some kind of unstructured process, which really uses kind of gut-based decisions to try and make hires. What a lot of founders then find is that they wind up with people that are not a good fit for the organization, don't really scale well, and then have to burn a lot of cycles and energy actually terminating these bad hires. So it's really helpful to make the right hire in the first place. And you can actually do that just by building a data-driven structured hiring process. We're going to go through 5 steps here. You can grab the template. It's going to be in the description below. Feel free to copy, use this however you want. A lot of this is going to be customizable and specific to your use case. So what I would recommend is actually copying this for every type of role that you create. So you maybe have one for sales roles, one for engineering roles, maybe one for roles on the business side, and you kind of customize it every time you run a process. But this 30 to 60 minutes of upfront work is going to yield incredible benefits over the long term. So with that being said, let's jump in and we'll jump into the first step in the process. So we actually covered this in the last video, and there's a link to the template at the top here. You can also just go back to the video and watch that. But I think the first step in creating a hiring process is really defining exactly what you're looking for. And that is this ideal candidate profile. So rather than creating this kind of long list of different requirements and experience and qualifications that you think you might need, let's actually define what does this ideal person look like as if you were creating a persona to sell to. And what this is going to help you do is, as you're assessing different candidates, both from kind of sourcing, but also interviewing down to offer, you can see how that person stacks up against this ideal candidate and really start to rate them very objectively rather than having to subjectively measure candidates against each other, which in another video, we'll talk through the dangers of doing that. But suffice to say, it's pretty bad. So this is the first step in the process. I would highly recommend spending a good chunk of time really defining what you're looking for. Go through to this other template and use that. That's actually going to use ChatGPT to create this profile. And all I've done here is, from the example that we used last time, is pulled this profile in, which is a back-end engineer. I'm looking at the educational background and kind of all the different aspects that we would expect to see in this individual. So let's assume you've got your ideal candidate profile really honed in. What are you going to do next? Well, before you start even sourcing, I think it's a good idea to create the interview process. Like, define each stage of the process before you even start talking to a candidate. This not only helps you to understand what's coming next, but also creates this mutually exclusive and collectively exhaustive list of different attributes that you're going to test. So you take the ideal candidate profile. These are the aspects that we want to test. And as you move through the recruiting funnel, you're going to gradually go deeper on the different attributes. So the initial stages, the recruiter, actually what I've seen happen quite a lot here is that the founder or one of the co-founders will actually take this initial recruiter screen if they don't have recruiters to do this work. And really what you're trying to find here is the overall interest level. And kind of as you go through the process, you get a little deeper into analyzing what the candidate is able to do until you get to the final point where essentially the executive is going to kind of weigh in and see, is this person the type of person that's going to add value to the business? Are they going to grow with the organization? And that's the final decision. By the time you get here, you should have all the data points you need to make a hiring decision. And data points is really key here. And so what you want to do is define how you're going to score the candidate through these different scorecards. So I've given an example here. You can copy these, but for every interview, you want to have this scorecard. Now you can set this up in Google Forms. You can use a tool like Qualtrics. If you have an applicant tracking system, you may already have this in place. But what you want to do is score each candidate against different criteria. There's some notes here to describe exactly what we're looking for here. But by the end of the process, you should have, using this scoring guide, kind of like a stack ranking of candidates at each stage of the process. What this may also help with is if you screen someone early on and they're kind of falling down in one area but otherwise look pretty good, you could actually hand that off to the next interviewer. Say, hey, this person didn't really give me a good example of technical innovation, for instance. So when you go to the competency interview, let's see if the interviewer there can actually drill into that one a little bit more and maybe get a different perspective or maybe get a different point of view. This is actually going to help you to avoid eliminating candidates that maybe just have a bad day or give a bad example, and actually make sure that you're finding the best candidates overall. So that's the interview process. You've got that set up. Now you can actually start recruiting. What are you going to do? You're going to start sourcing, most likely. Now, it is true that you can generally get good candidates from inbound, especially when I'm recording this in 2024, when the market is pretty strong for employers. But you probably want to look across all your different types of channels that you could think of. I've given 5 examples here. Maybe you don't even have named examples. You have externally sourced, you have inbound, maybe you have a referral channel as well. And you want to look at the total volume we're getting from those different pipelines. And then you can actually start doing some calculations. You don't necessarily have to go this deep. This is more for a larger team that's maybe hiring a lot of people. If you only have 1 or 2 hires, you can probably skip this step and really just measure the types of quality of candidates you're getting through, maybe using the scorecards that we looked at in the last stage. But essentially what you want to do is look, based on the different channels, how much am I spending on these channels and what is the cost to get to an offer? And then what's really important is the pass-through rate. Now, pass-through rate is really helpful because what you can very quickly do is identify if you have a shortfall, especially in a certain channel. Where here, maybe we're passing a lot of people on LinkedIn because they have great profiles through, but they're actually not performing as well on the technical and behavioral interviews as some of the other candidates that are coming through. And you can see you go all the way down here, and we're really just measuring based on the kind of like stage 1 to stage 2, how many people we're passing through. What I would normally expect to see is maybe a 50% pass-through rate throughout. Recruiters, if you're getting good top of funnel sourcing, are probably going to screen a higher percentage, but maybe that's unrealistic to screen 80 out of 100 candidates that you source through. And these you can adjust and basically add in your own numbers. So this is a really good kind of baseline for recruiting metrics. What you can then start to do is look across your different sources and measure different metrics if they're important to you. Cost per hire, quality of hire, time to hire are generally the big 3 that get measured. But it also, as someone who's a big advocate for experience, I think net promoter score for the candidate, the hiring manager, and the recruiter, using those different channels is going to be really helpful. So you can see if you're having a good experience from a branding perspective based on the channel, and it will help you to identify any shortfalls that you can maybe dig into in a future date. All right, so you've got your sourcing built out, you're getting candidates through the funnel, you know which stage everyone's at and you're interviewing them. The next stage to think about is how you're going to communicate and create this really good candidate experience as people go through and make sure that you're kind of keeping the process moving. So I've drafted some pretty basic sample messages with the help of ChatGPT, but what you want to do is set these up so that at every stage in the process, the candidate knows what they're doing, what's expected of them, and what's coming next. You're not really going to give the answers to the questions that you're going to ask, but you're going to set them up so that they know how to perform their best and give you all the information that you need. Communication is going to be really important throughout, and this is going to be especially important when you get to the end of the process and you want to convert someone to a hire. If they've had a great experience throughout the whole process, then they're more likely to feel valued and accept the offer rather than go with one of your competitors. So there's sample emails to send through each stage of the process. We're not going to go into too much detail here. One keynote is make sure you have a good rejection email so that you can remove candidates from your process and just make sure that they're not left hanging or ghosted as many people fear. And the final step in the process, which a lot of people forget about, is once you actually have that offer signed, the job's not done. You really need to think about how do you set up this new hire for success. What I would recommend is you have this kind of 30, 60, 90-day plan already in place before the candidate has signed the offer, because then you can actually explain to them how that process is going to work. But what's really helpful is really understanding what is the person going to do for their first 7 days. Once they've signed and they join, they can actually just generally manage this process themselves, and you can have all these points of contact and tools and everything set up for them so that they can really kind of jump into their role and get started straight away. And that's how you're going to get the most success out of a new hire. We have sample onboarding plans, and then actually gathering feedback is going to be really important. So from the first day they start, how are they doing? How are they settling in? How is the hiring manager experiencing this new hire? And are they having is everything living up to expectations? And what you can then do is actually take this feedback and then use it to inform the next hiring process. So if there's something missed or something that wasn't communicated effectively, you can actually inject that earlier in the process so that you're creating a better experience for everyone, but also a more efficient process as you're making sure that everyone knows what to expect as they're moving through the funnel. So that was it. Going back to the 5 steps, make sure that you have your ideal candidate profile set up before you start building up the interview process. Create the structured interview process. Make sure that you're measuring performance at each stage. Make sure it's mutually exclusive, collectively exhaustive. That way, you know that every point in the ideal candidate profile is going to have some kind of metric attached to it, some data point that you can use to compare candidates against each other, but using an objective assessment rather than just kind of subjectively start ranking people. And this is going to yield incredible benefits when you get to the decision point at the end of the process. Make sure that you're using sourcing tools that are actually giving you the right results and not just generating a whole bunch of additional work for you or your recruiting team. Make sure you're communicating effectively throughout. And then finally, don't stop once the offer's signed. Keep going, communicate with the candidate, make sure they have a really strong onboarding plan, then gather feedback from day one and learn from that feedback to figure out how you can improve the process moving forward. I hope you like this one. If you like these kind of videos, make sure you subscribe. The subscription note is going to be up on the screen, as well as one of the more recent videos that might be more relevant to you. Hope to hear any feedback. Please drop any comments below. Always love to hear what's going on, and see you soon. Take care.